I'm just so relieved, Buck, because, I've said all along, I support Israel. I call myself a Zionist. I think Israel obviously had the moral high ground in this entire conflict. It was brutally attacked. 10/7 was an atrocity. But I watched the polls in the United States going like this in terms of support for Israel. They lost the entire Democratic Party. They lost almost all independents, and they were starting to lose Republicans. Young Republicans mostly are gone. So the erosions were really at the younger levels. People under 30, I think it was literally 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10 who said, we don't want to send any more aid to Israel. So to me, it was just like, they've got to find a way out. Israel cannot lose the United States. It just can't. That can't happen. It's actually really important to world peace that relationship stays strong and that people feel good about it here in America. And it was just starting, for whatever reason. Hamas is great at propaganda, the left wing, the oppression narratives. I agree with everything you said. To me, it just didn't even really matter what was causing it. The fact is, it was happening and it just needed to stop. And I think Trump saw that too. And he said that. He raised the polls with Bibi and he told him, like, even Bibi's polls were going down and it needed to wrap up.
This is why, though, I think, and again, I understand, like, today is the day of celebration. I completely agree with that. I think every reasonable person does, just because the bloodshed has stopped, all the things we've talked about. But I also think that now maybe or maybe in the days ahead, the weeks ahead, maybe today is just celebration day, right? That's fine. But in the weeks ahead, people should reflect a bit on why what you are talking about, which is absolutely true. I mean, you're just stating facts. There was a loss of support for Israel. Why was that occurring? If something equivalent to, something equivalent rather happened to us as what happened to the Israelis on 9/11. And I was one of a few million Americans who found themselves afterwards in Iraq, in Afghanistan, dealing with the decisions made after a war was brought to our doorstep. And I think that given the level of sadism that the Hamas terrorists engaged in, 2 years ago in October, I think that the Israelis actually were operating in terms of warfare and urban combat with tremendous restraint. And I think that people who started to turn on Israel were losing sight of the moral clarity that is necessary to understand what's going on in a conflict like this. I'll give you an example. I'm sure you remember the late, great Christopher Hitchens, because we would always come up against this in the war on terror, the GWAT, as we called it. Megyn, he would say that if the fighting against terrorism is the cause of terrorism, then we've lost and the terrorists win. I mean, that was basically his formulation. If every time we do something in response, speaking from the American perspective, we do something in response and we bomb the wrong house one day or we shoot an innocent civilian and now we're the bad guys because we're actually fighting a war against jihadism, which seeks to eradicate us after terrorist attacks like 9/11, well, then we've already ceded the battlefield before we've taken the battlefield. And I think that that's the formulation that a lot of people started to apply to the Israelis. Like, the problem is that Israel is dealing with the problem. That's a massive misunderstanding of not just the realities of what was happening in the region, but also of recent decades. The only reason that Hamas had Gaza was because Israel said, all right, fine, you know what? We're pulling out, and it was not politically popular in a whole bunch of different ways in Israel at the time. They had to pull Israelis out. I mean, actually physically pull them in some cases. They had to remove them. The military removed them. They left behind all this infrastructure, and Hamas turned it into
live on Fox News.
Den.
Yeah, no, I was there. I mean, I wasn't actually physically in the region, but we covered that every day, and we were shocked when Hamas won the elections that followed. No one predicted that. Nobody thought that's where the Palestinians, though we knew they weren't, fans of Israel, were going to go, but they elected a group that, its whole mission is to destroy Israel. And they do not believe Israel has a right to exist. And the powder keg was about to explode, and it did explode on 10/7. I do think, just to pick up on what you were saying, the bombing of Iran scared a lot of Americans, thinking we are getting too close to this. In the same way, many have felt we're getting too involved in saber rattling over in Russia. They're happy to support our allies. It's Israel's fight. It's Ukraine's fight. And we'll be in the supportive role. But the more we get pulled in directly, the more Americans get uncomfortable, because then you start thinking about your kid and what might be coming his way.
Of course.
And I think that didn't help the polling either. I understand why Trump did it. And, we talked all about it on the show. But My bottom line is, thank God it's over, at least for now. It seems genuinely over. And I have reason to feel a tiny bit optimistic, which is never a word you can use about the Middle East because of those Arab nations, Buck, you know? But let me ask you this. This is what I want to ask you. After any war, people are angry, and like some of the hatred is even more deep. You know, we read last night or this morning on AM Update, our morning short news podcast, the statement from the Palestinians about this. There was no joy expressed in that. They did not sound like the Palestinians we just showed. It was like, we'll see whether Israel lives up to its obligations. You know, the hatred is so deep. And now, though Israel's done an amazing job of defanging its enemies, from Hezbollah to the Houthis to Syria, you know, we could go down the list, Iran, there's going to be lingering greater resentments toward Israel than we even started with. And I wonder how you see that playing out now.
Well, that's obviously a really critical consideration going forward. And I would say this. One is that whether it's Hezbollah or Hamas or Iran and all of the terror tentacles that Iran extends throughout the Middle East and quite honestly around the world, they are in a weaker position now than they have been in certainly in decades. A large part of that is what the Israelis were able to do. We all know about the pager operation, one of the most incredible espionage, intelligence, covert actions. It was a really covert action, not espionage. In all time, in all history, the Israelis were able to defang their worst enemies finally, I think, in a way that is substantial and could have real benefits going forward beyond just, you know, we're stopping them from killing us right now. The same thing you mentioned with Trump with the strike on Iran. I can tell you, Megyn, I was in Taiwan last week meeting with all the leadership there, including the president, and they cited that Trump taking action on Iran is very heartening for them because it shows exactly what you and I were talking about. This is a guy who, if you think you're going to get away with nonsense, you're going to get, you know, a Moab dropped on your nuke facility or whatever. I mean, he's gonna go for it. So that sends a real message to allies all over the world. And you know, I just think on the issue of Palestinian hatred for Israel, which unfortunately I think a lot of people in our country don't have a full understanding of. A long time ago, I had a close friend who did a whole series of interviews with the families of suicide bombers. And this was 20 years ago, maybe. It was after the second Intifada. Because like I said, I started in Middle East stuff even pre 9/11 on the Arab-Israeli issue. This was before 9/11, Megyn. This was what, if you're going to Middle East studies, by far the biggest area of focus, right? On college campuses, et cetera. And these families of suicide bombers they'd lost their son overwhelmingly. Occasionally you'll have a female suicide bomber, but they'd lost their sons. And they were happy when they talked about it. And they said that he's a martyr and that they hope that he killed as many Israelis as possible. Disgusting and evil stuff. And this is unfortunately very widespread in the Hamasistan that was Gaza. When I was the third largest mass casualty terror attack of our era, number one is 9/11. Number two is 10/7. Number three is very little known, but I actually knew it because I was in Iraq when it happened, and it ties in, I think, to Hamas and their mentality. It was in a little village outside of northwestern Iraq, or in northwestern Iraq, called Qataniya, and about 800 people were killed in this village in one terrorist attack. Nobody in the West really even remembers this except for some military members, I'm sure, who are listening right now. And it was Yazidis. And later on, we know the Yazidis were part of they tried to exterminate the Yazidis, Al-Qaeda in Iraq, and then ISIS. But Megyn, the point about the attack was there was no military value whatsoever to blow up this village. They just rolled in dump trucks. They were completely defenseless. They had no civil militia. They had nothing. They were in the desert, just people living out there, not really a part of the conflict. But jihadists blew them up because they view them as non-believers, they're Yazidis, and they hate them. So they killed 800 people in the middle of a war when they were fighting the coalition. That is the same mentality. That is the same mentality that you have with Hamas.
Buy gold and get free silver. That's right. For every $5,000 purchased from Birch Gold Group this month in advance of Veterans Day, they will send you a free patriotic silver round that commemorates the Gadsden and American flags. It's like the Cornelius' purchase of gold, silver and gold all together, thanks to Birch Gold. Look, gold is up over 40% since the beginning of this year, and Birch Gold can help you own it by converting an existing IRA or 401k into a tax-sheltered IRA in physical gold. Plus, they will send you free silver honoring our veterans on qualifying purchases. And if you are current or former military, Birch Gold has a special offer just for you. They're waiving custodial fees for the first year on investments of any amount. With an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau and thousands, tens of thousands of happy customers, consider diversifying your savings into gold. Text MK to the number 989898 for a free info kit and to claim your eligibility for free silver with qualifying purchases. Before the end of the month. Do it before the end of the month. Again, text MK to 989898. Message and data rates may apply. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.